The desert evening always carried a strange kind of silence, but that night it felt heavier, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Jesse Cole, a dusty cowboy with worn boots and a horse just as tired as he was, stopped when he noticed something impossible. In the orange sand, a footprint so large, it looked like a pond had dried into the shape of a human step. The edges were deep, packed hard, and stretched almost the length of his horse. Nothing he knew, nothing he'd ever heard around campfires, came close to explaining it. Before Jesse could even dismount, the ground shuddered. Not like a normal tremor, more like someone dropping a massive weight somewhere behind the cliffs. His horse snorted and backed away nervously. Jesse swallowed hard and kept his hand close to his holster, but he didn't draw. Whatever could make a footprint like that wouldn't be bothered by a single bullet. Then she appeared. A towering figure stepped out from behind a ridge. Her presence so huge, she seemed to reshape the landscape around her. She was an Apache woman, massive, powerful, with skin like sun-warmed earth and thick braids swinging against her shoulders. Even from a distance, Jesse could see marks painted across her arms in patterns he didn't recognize, symbols that seemed ancient. Each step she took made the dust jump. She wasn't running or threatening, just walking normally, yet her footfalls rolled like thunder. Jesse froze, his breath stuck somewhere between awe and panic. She stopped a few yards away, lowering her gaze to meet his. Her eyes weren't hostile. They were steady, calm, like she'd been expecting him for a long time. The desert wind carried her quiet exhale, warm and steady. He realized he was staring, jaw dropped. His throat felt dry as sand, but somehow he pushed out words, ridiculous ones. The first that came to mind, What happens if I touch you? The question hung in the air, stupidly small compared to the giant who heard it. For a moment she didn't move. Then the edges of her stern expression softened into a slow, knowing smile. She didn't laugh at him. Instead, she seemed amused by the tiny, confused being standing before her. "You would learn," she said, her voice deep and smooth, "that size does not decide danger." Before Jesse could respond, a hawk's shrill cry sliced the silence. The giant woman looked sharply toward the canyon and motioned for him to follow. "That question must wait," she warned. "Something stirs in these lands." The Canyon of Echoes was unlike any place Jesse had ever seen. Even the light behaved strangely there, slipping across the stone walls in thin flashes as if the cliffs themselves were alive. Every sound multiplied, his boots tapping, his horse snorting, even his breathing, each echo bouncing back in distorted layers. But none of those sounds compared to the booming rhythm of the giant. Apache woman's footsteps ahead of him. Every step she took rolled through the canyon like a distant storm drifting closer. Jesse kept his horse close, though the animal trembled each time the ground vibrated. The giant woman didn't speak much. She moved with silent focus, her dark eyes scanning the jagged cliffs above them. Sometimes she paused and placed her hand against the rock, feeling for something Jesse couldn't even sense. When she did, the canyon fell unnaturally quiet, as if waiting for her command. Jesse noticed strange markings carved into the walls, long, deep scratches that ran across the stone like claw tracks. Some were higher than a rider could reach, higher than any normal animal could jump. "You weren't the one who made those, were you?" he asked in a shaky voice. She did not stop walking as she answered. "No, there are creatures here older than your towns, larger than your stories allow." Her voice didn't carry fear, only respect for the land. Before Jesse could ask what kind of creatures she meant, a low rumble shook the canyon. Pebbles tumbled from the cliffs. His horse reared, whinnying in panic. Jesse grabbed the reins, trying to calm it as the rumble grew deeper, closer, vibrating in his bones. The giant woman turned sharply, her braids swinging like heavy ropes. "Behind me," she ordered, stepping between Jesse and the dark crack forming along the canyon wall. A massive shadow emerged, stretching across the sand. Then two golden eyes appeared, glowing like lanterns. The creature stepped forward, a colossal desert cat, its fur rough and thorned from years of surviving the harsh land. It was as big as a wagon, muscles rippling under its hide, and each step made the canyon tremble. Jesse raised his rifle on instinct, but the giant woman lifted one enormous finger. "No bullets! The land has its own balance. Let me deal with this." The beast roared, shaking the canyon walls. Jesse felt his heart leap into his throat. The giant woman surged forward quicker than someone her size should be. She caught the charging creature by the scruff of its neck, twisted her body, and slammed it into the ground with a thundering crash that sent dust exploding upward. The beast hissed in pain, then scrambled back, retreating into the shadows it had emerged from. Jesse stared wide-eyed. He'd never seen strength like that, strength used not for destruction, but protection. She looked back at him calmly. "Now you understand," she said. "This land needs guardians, and you stepped into its path at the right time." Jesse swallowed, realizing she wasn't just big. Night settled over the plateau in a wide blanket of silver and indigo. Stars glimmered like scattered embers from some ancient sky forge, and the cool wind carried the clean scent of sage. Jesse finally let his tired legs rest, sinking onto a smooth boulder while his horse grazed quietly nearby. The land felt calmer up here, away from the narrow canyon that had nearly swallowed them earlier. Still, his heartbeat needed time to catch up with everything he had witnessed. The giant Apache woman stood a few steps away, tall enough that her shadow stretched farther than a campfire's reach. She surveyed the open horizon, as if every shift of wind spoke a message only she could hear. Even standing still, she radiated the same solid presence as a stone tower, dependable and ancient. Jesse had never met anyone, human or otherwise, who carried themselves with such unshakable purpose. "You saved my skin back there," Jesse said, rubbing the back of his neck. His voice sounded small in the open air, like he was speaking into the vastness rather than to a person. "I protected the land," she corrected calmly, though there was a faint hint of amusement in her tone. "You just happened to be standing where danger aimed its claws." Jesse chuckled awkwardly. "Well, I appreciate it either way." She finally turned toward him, the starlight reflecting off her painted markings. For the first time since he'd met her, she lowered herself to one knee, bringing her massive face closer to his height. Her movements were careful, deliberate, as though she feared shifting the ground too much. "When you first asked about touching me," she said, "you carried fear, curiosity, and doubt all tangled together. Touch can reveal truth. If you still want to understand, you may." Jesse hesitated. He didn't mean the question the way it had sounded earlier. He simply wanted to know if she was real, if someone so impossibly large could exist without crushing the world around her. Slowly he placed his hand against her open palm. Her skin felt warm, textured like polished stone, yet undeniably alive. She curled her fingers gently, letting him feel the strength in her grip, not to intimidate him, but to show control. "You see?" she said softly. "Power is not meant to harm unless necessary." Jesse let out a long breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Guess I judged you wrong at first glance. We all misjudge what we do not understand." She stood again, her gaze shifting toward the northern mountains. Jesse followed her stare. Strange lights flickered in the sky, soft at first, then pulsing brighter, like signals from something waking after centuries of sleep. "What does that mean?" he asked, uneasy. "That our journey has only begun," she said, "and the land is calling for us." Jesse mounted his horse, gripping the reins. "All right, then. Lead the way." The giant woman stepped forward, and together they moved toward the mysterious glow, their unlikely partnership just beginning to unfold.